recording of it available to everybody. So hopefully that's okay with everybody. Um, if not, let us know and we'll try and find a way of blanking you out or something of the final video. So I think that's a bit of the background and where we're at and what we're aiming to do today. So like I say, you're really welcome today to the event. I'm going to try and do a bit of a whistle-stop tour of where we've come from over the last 3 years around co-production. So for those who don't know, the need for kind of a co-production charter or a promise was identified both by Stoke and Staffordshire following Ofsted inspections relating to their children and young people SEND systems. The City of Stoke-on-Trent developed and launched a charter, which was co-produced with their Parent Carer Forum, PEGIS. And in the county, we took an approach where we developed a promise. One of the challenges that came about from the promise was that the scope was quickly expanded from just being children and young people SEND to the whole children and young people system, and subsequently it was adopted by adult social care, which is really exciting that everybody is working to the kind of commitments of the promise and the aspiration of co-producing as and where that's feasible to do so. Alongside the promise, a toolkit was developed, and we'll share a link to that in a minute. That covers all aspects of co-production, including what it is, how to do it, the barriers, the challenges, checklists to help people to do it. And it also covers 3 areas of or 3 levels of co-production. So you've got individual levels, so that's the case worker, key worker kind of thing where you're working with an individual or a family, through to the collective levels where you might be looking at a service or something like that, through to a strategic level where you're looking at a strategy or the whole implementation of an approach across an area. So the other thing that's happened over the last 18 months is that we've decided not to focus on one particular tool as being the answer to co-production. So some of you are here from MPFT. You might be really familiar with the Whose Shoes model that has been developed and rolled out across a number of areas of MPFT and actually across the council as well. Obviously, I mentioned the charter with the City Council and the promise with the County Council. And so the whole aim is really to promote co-production as an approach rather than a specific tool. We're also aware that there's existing approaches such as relational restorative practice, I think child first approaches, particularly in police and youth justice, strength-based models and other things that really actually closely align to co-production. Phrases like doing with rather than doing to, all of those kinds of things have become part of our language in recent weeks and months. It's probably also useful just to say that some of the tools have been signed off at strategic boards that cover Stoke and Staffordshire as well, including Violence Reduction Alliance and the ICB Children and Young People's Programme Board. So these are high-level boards. I think the Safeguarding Board as well in Staffordshire has adopted it. So high-level boards are really focusing on the need for co-production and the desire for the workforce to grapple with it and put it into practice, as I say, where it's appropriate to do so. So over the last 18 months, we've been tasked with focusing on supporting the workforce to develop to raise awareness, first of all, of co-production. It's probably one of those buzzwords that we've heard, but also getting beyond that so that we're actually developing our understanding of what co-production is, and then finally building the confidence to have a go. And as I say, that's what this session is all about today. The impact to date, it's interesting, since our workforce survey went out, what was it, about a month ago, the views of the videos that we've created as part of the playlist, the co-production playlist, have actually gone from just over 600 views to over 1,000 views. Natalie was telling me just before we started that there's been 1,700 hits in terms of their internal comms over the last week or two around co-production week. So the awareness is definitely getting out there. And what I'll do briefly, because I'm not really into sharing slides, but I think it would be helpful to, if I can, and I'm not sure I've got the facility to share, but in terms of the workforce survey that we did, it's really interesting in terms of awareness. 5.1 out of 10 was the score from the Stoke and Stafford ICB. Voluntary sector scored their awareness as over 6. Community services just under 5. Fire and police were the lowest, around 2. Local authorities really high, 7.5 out of 10 was their awareness score of co-production. When it comes to understanding, it's a little bit lower, but still pretty consistent. And when it comes to confidence, it's a little bit lower, but still consistent across the workforce. So we've got some really good data to build from as we move forwards from this week of raising awareness around co-production. Other bits of impact that we know of about 50 areas where co-production is being used, and hopefully from the chat now we might have some more examples of that and some more opportunities to understand what you guys are doing. I'm going to put a couple of links into the chat which may be helpful for people. The first is, I suppose, what our landing page in terms of co-production for Staffordshire. This is a page on our website which will take you to all of the resources that are available for the local force, as well as providing a bit of a background to things. There's also, as I mentioned earlier, a YouTube playlist that we're adding to as and when we get opportunities to, and you've got videos on there from strategic leaders, from people who are sharing case studies. There's a journey so far video, which is quite a good watch. So there's lots of things that can bring you up to speed around co-production. And there's finally a Padlet. I don't know if people have used Padlets in the past, but a Padlet is kind of an online notice board. And if you're a real geek around co-production, then that's the place to go, because you can literally delve into that to your heart's content. There's national and local, regional, all kinds of stuff that's there to help you, and potentially quite specific things as well. So if you're thinking about co-production in a trauma-informed environment, then there are some specific tools there that would be really useful. So that's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour, and I know that's a very whistle-stop tour. I'm very open to any questions around that. We've got a few minutes, or if there's any gaps in people's knowledge that you think, actually, before we go any further, it would be really useful to know this. So over to you in terms of any questions or anything that you might need in terms of information that I haven't covered in that whistle-stop tour. This is where it goes, the tumbleweed moment that Natalie was talking about. If everybody's happy with that in terms of bringing people up to speed and an awareness of where we're at locally, then the next phase will be to hand over to Rachel to do a little bit around understanding co-production. So how do we understand it? What actually is it? So I can't see any hands, and so I'm going to move on and say, Rachel, over to you to lead us into that topic of understanding co-production.
I'm afraid I am going to do death by PowerPoint, only so I've got something to refer to and I don't go off on a tangent, because it has been known. So let's make a start. Can we all see that? Yeah, super. Okay, so my name's Rachel Mundy-Crates and I work for the Voice Project. I'm the manager here at the Voice Project. We are a county-wide project under Staffordshire County Council as part of the Improvement, Performance and Engagement team within Staffordshire County Council. Our mission is to work with children, young people and families who have received a service from Children's Services and the wider council to look at how we can improve provision moving forward. So listening to what's worked well, what hasn't worked well, where we can make those improvements and hopefully make the services better in the future. So I'm here to talk to you about co-production and how we do it at the Voice Project, and also talk about engagement and the differences between that. So when I refer to co-production, it's around, like I say, children, young people and families working together, and it's around them being equal in terms of what they're looking at, designing, delivering and evaluating the services that they've got lived experience that they can share with us. It is very much different to consultation, and I'll talk more about the differences in a little while. But it's very much, when we think about co-production, it's about sharing that same vision. So whether we are working with young people as a group, whether we're working with families, it's about having that shared vision, that shared idea. It's around us sharing the responsibilities and the power. So we're equal, whether we're physically sat around the table, whether we're on Teams, whether we're meeting one-to-one. There's no hierarchy there. It's also around everybody's knowledge and experiences are respected. So co-production is driven around using those lived experiences, finding out what it's really like to receive this service or live in the footsteps of a young person living in Staffordshire, and helping them to use that lived experience journey to hopefully help us to look at provision more positively in the future. It's also around us looking at how we can actively involve young people and families in that process. So it's not just bringing them in at one point, it's having them right at the start of that journey, of that idea, of that project, taking them right through into the end of that particular journey. It's about building trust, it's about being honest, and that is the biggest feedback we get from young people, is they want professionals, they want our partners, anybody that works with them, whether we're doing co-production, engagement, participation. It's around us being open and honest about expectations, about objectives, about what we're looking at achieving, and that helps to build that trust and hopefully have a successful partnership. In terms of the reasons why we need to do more co-production, it's very much around more effective services, more relevant services, and meeting the needs of those that are accessing the services. And we can only do that by involving those with lived experience. It's also around building trust and satisfaction. I think we've probably all got an example, either professionally or personally, where someone's asked for our views or to be involved in something and nothing's happened, and you may get asked again, and your reluctancy to then explain your story or give you feedback perhaps isn't as it was the first time you were asked. So it's going back to that honesty and trust of, this is what we want to achieve, we're going to keep you informed, we're going to work with you, and hopefully we're going to have a really successful outcome that we can share with you. And it's also around empowering communities. So we work with the most vulnerable young people in Staffordshire, and it's looking at how can we build their confidence and their ability to be involved in co-production. it's understanding what their needs are and looking about how we can meet those needs in order for them to be able to participate. So it might be looking at locations of venues, meetings, the times, transport, what's in it for them. Can we do a hot meal? You know, some of our care leavers who are living out in the community actually love a hot meal, a home cooked meal, and that's something that they will engage with us because they know that they will get a meal that day, and it's one less thing for them to worry about. But actually thinking about having a meal is their priority over, do I really want to be involved in co-production? So by using that as an incentive, they come along, they'll have, like I say, have a meal, they're so socialized, but then actually they recognize that they are part of the Voice project, or they are part of that journey, and actually will buy into co-production. So it's thinking around the target audience that you're working with on how to get them on board in relation to co-production. So what's the difference between co-production and engagement? So it's around that balance of power. So with engagement, I'll give you examples a little bit later, but for instance, we may be asked to look at a policy. So we're looking at that policy, we'll take it to young people to gather their feedback. The policy may be renewed or reviewed or actually rewritten, but we only involve the young people in looking at, do we feel that this policy is meeting the needs? Where co-production is, that power is shared. So we come to that decision that actually, does it need to be reviewed? Does it need to be tweaked, or do we need to rewrite it? And that's something you do together. The role of the people, so that again is around it being more equal in co-production. So instead of being informed and consulted, the young people, the families are involved in that whole journey. So right from the start, right through to the end. Decision making and the vision that we're looking at taking, again, alters with engagement and co-production. Engagement can drive the decision, but co-production, you do have that, this is what we're aiming for, these are the clear objectives, and we decide that as a group. Timing, that's probably the most different when it comes to engagement and co-production. Engagement, it can be something that can be added onto a session. It can be something that can be arranged at short notice. Co-production does take more time, more planning. You need to find out when people are available. If you're working with parents, is that during the school time, or is that during the evenings? A lot of the events that we run, a lot of the sessions happen during the evening, around perhaps tea time. So again, we're going back to that, do we need to provide a meal and refreshments? And the fact that that journey is going to take longer because they're going to be starting from the beginning right through to the end. So there needs to be that commitment. And there's also that purpose. So what are we looking at? Are we gathering the views, taking them away, and then embedded them into change and hopefully influencing decisions in the future? Or is it that long-term partnership that we're hoping to get everybody on board? Just trying to move on. So when we talk about engagement and co-production, they're both important, and they're both approaches that we use as mechanisms of participation. But there is a clear difference. And I think the theatre show is a good example of that. So in engagement, you're part of the audience. You've bought your ticket, so you've said, yeah, I am quite interested in seeing the show, I quite fancy that. You go along, you watch the show. Afterwards, you may feedback via different mechanisms. You may leave a review to say, well, actually it was good, but it would have been better if if we'd done this, or if you perhaps consider that in the future. Co-production is about being part of that whole production. So you would be involved in creating the script, you'd look at the staging, you'd look at what night it was delivered, who was in what part, what programme are you going to produce, how much is that programme, how much are the tickets. You would be involved in the production throughout the night, and then at the end, obviously, there's going to be a review. You would look at how that process or those productions went. Is there anything we want to change? How would we do differently next time? And the tweaks that way. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an analogy of how that works. Another one that staff members shared with me in the past is about going to a restaurant and being given a menu. So you get a choice of what you're going to eat, but it's from that menu. Co-production is if you were in the kitchen looking at the ingredients, what are we going to create? Let's cook it through. Let's see if it works, and we create that menu together. So when we look at examples of the Voice Project and what we've been involved in, so I talked to you briefly about pocket money policy. That's something that was raised with us from the service to say, actually, young people's pocket money, whether they're in foster care or in residential care, can differ, and it can also differ between foster carers. So we took that policy to the young people to say, what are your thoughts? What pocket money do you get? How's that given to you? And we were able to influence the change in that policy. Front door, that's something we're working on at the moment, on how we can improve the experiences of those families who enter our front door when they're seeking support and advice. So again, we're working with families and parents to grasp an understanding of how that journey worked for them, and actually what can we do better, and what would have helped with that first initial contact with us as a service. But then we also do engagement around informing practice. So that might be we're looking at delivering training to staff. How do we get the voices of young people and parents involved in that training? So we might do a focus session to help us develop that particular session. And we get views again using lived experiences from parents, young people and children to influence that moving forward. Co-production examples within the Voice Project. That's where we've done it with our Children in Care Council. So we have our hot topic, and the hot topic is a concern, issue, challenge that our children in care face that they have raised directly with us. So it might be around, at the moment we're looking at social media and internet use. Young people struggle to perhaps access the internet if they're living independently as a care leaver, or we've got young people that actually can only use the internet at certain times of the day or in certain rooms, and actually they are approaching the care leaving age where we need to be building up their independence. So that became a hot topic, and that's something that we work with our corporate parenting panel and our young people around. How do we look at improving this for our young people moving forward? So with our hot topics, we do lots of consultation, which is led by young people. They write the surveys, they write the engagement sessions that we run, and we go out and work with the communities. We also do consultation with staff and with our foster carers. Again, that has been written by our staff and by our foster carer to use outside with our workforce. Once we've gathered all that information, we then sit round the table and we look at what are the common themes, what are the challenges, and look at solutions. So young people sharing what's worked for them, what hasn't worked, their lived experience. We then create an action plan. So that's with our foster carers, with our young people, with our professionals. Once we have a draft action plan, that then goes to our corporate parenting panel with our counsellors and with our officers, and we discuss that as a whole group. So real co-production in action, all sat round. Do we think this action plan is going to do what we want it to do? If so, that's then signed off, and we start to unpick how we then look at taking the action plan forward and whose roles and responsibilities those are. That includes the young people. So for the one of the hot topics we've done previously is actually some guidance for staff, and young people have said, yeah, I'm willing to do that. I want to write that for staff. So that's something that our children and young people have taken on board and taken the responsibility of, and have completed that, and then have shared that with staff, and we can embed that into practice. As well as devising the hot topic and the action plan, we then look at how's that then reviewed, and that sits under the umbrella of the Voice project, but again, it's young people reviewing it with our foster carers, with our parents, and with our professional staff, around looking at, has the action plan moved on? Are we meeting the needs of the young people, and what impact has it had? We've also done co-production around supporting young people in education. We had some young people that approached us and said, actually, education didn't work for me and I ended up being excluded. And I'm thinking that there's actually steps that we could have put in place that would have stopped that. So we worked very closely with this particular young person to create some questions. They wanted to go and reach out to more young people to get an understanding of their journey in education. It was a big piece of work. It took several months to go out and do the initial research and the consultation, but for them then to come back and develop that into a report. And that has now been fed into training, which our virtual school are delivering to school settings, in the hope to build the understanding of what young people have shared with us around the barriers and challenges that they find within the school setting. We've also got the House Project, which was an initiative that was taken on board from young people, saying that there is a need for a different approach for young people who are looking towards leaving care. And actually the House Project provides that stability that they found they would need. In order to get the House Project, because it's a charity, on board, the young people had to pitch about why Staffordshire should be chosen and why they thought it'd be beneficial. That was successful, and we're able to work in partnership with the House Project and the young people to develop that project, and that's currently working over in Tamworth. We do interview panels for staff. We've done some for the Assistant Director and the Deputy Director of Children's Services. We do some for Virtual School Head. We've also just been involved in the Family Hub Lead and supporting parents and carers to be involved in that. And again, it's that process of looking at what is it you want to ask, what do you see this post doing in terms of supporting young people and carers, and what do you see the ideal candidate is, so they come up with their own scenarios or their own questions, which they then deliver. They then score the candidates, and that's then included in the overall scoring scheme for that recruitment process. We also do communicating with children training. This was written, developed, designed, and is delivered by young people to our workforce, around understanding how to effectively communicate with children, especially when they find that it might be more difficult to engage with some young people than others, and giving them a skill set and a toolkit of, this is how it was best for me for talking to young people, this is some of the things that they've shared. What I would say is if we feel like we are consulting young people and families rather than them being in control, then it's probably not true participation. And finally, just a few things around what to bear in mind when you're looking at co-production. So it's around empowerment, young people, families, those we're working with, they need to feel heard and valued. And young people will say, yeah, they say they're listening, but are they really listening? Are they actively listening to hopefully action? And I think there's
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
There's two ways of looking at that. I think we can all say we're listening to children, but are we listening to actually change? Better outcomes. We know that with co-production, we make better services. They're more relevant, responsive, and effective. And we're designing what those with lived experience and those that are going to be accessing the service actually need. Talked a lot about trust, and it's going back to that being honest and strengthening relationships. Again, that does take time, and in co-production, you need to allow time to work with young people and families and build up those relationships in order for them to then feel comfortable in sharing their journey and their paths. Support, there's lots of teams, there's lots of services that are out there doing it or have done it. Use their knowledge, just ask. You're aware of the Voice Project now. I'm going to share my contact details with you. If there is anything that you want to know or anything we can support you with, please do ask. And I must share that it's not always worked for us. And I think that's something that we need to be brave about and say, okay, it hasn't worked, but let's try again. It, like I say, it does take time, it does take resources, and also a shift in culture to be able to achieve that from all the people that are sat round that table. And also we need to recognise that not everybody perhaps wants to be involved in co-production, but that doesn't mean that we don't try and do it with those that do want to be involved. Times that we've worked with young people and they'll say, actually, I don't really want to do all that boring bit and that writing. Can you do the writing, and then can we come back and have a look at it once you've drafted something? And we said that's fine. You know, whatever works for them, and we are led by what works for them and what their needs are. And then finally, is there any questions? Is there anything that you'd like to ask or explore? I'm open to any question. My contact details are on there. If you have a question that perhaps you think later on I wish I'd asked that, then please do drop us an email.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rachel. That's a really thorough unpacking of co-production and loads of helpful images as well shared in the chat. In terms of time, probably what I'll say is if you've got an immediate question for Rachel or anything about the session so far, do shove that in the chat, and what we'll do is we'll move on to Natalie's presentation, or no, conversation, I think more than presentation, around the kind of growing in confidence element, because I think that's in a sense maybe why some of us are here, is to learn to be able to put into practice. But yeah, stick your questions in the chat and we'll hopefully get time to come back to them in a few minutes. So thanks, Rachel, and over to you, Natalie.
Thanks, Phil. Right, hello everybody. Thanks for Rachel's really useful presentation, actually, to talk about, you know, how the Voice Project are working so in tune really with young people affected by the services that are going to be affecting their lives. And I think it was a key point for me to just mention that's taken time, and I'm sure Rachel would agree with that. You try, you start again, you tear it up, you learn where you go wrong, and that's what all about building this practice goes, really. And I do think there is a little bit of unease sometimes, as Phil mentioned right at the beginning. We're at a point now where I do think co-production as a term is known, which is fantastic. There's a lot of theory around it, which is great. I think people's confidence and awareness in that respect is growing, but actually the true learning and confidence building comes through doing. And unfortunately, there isn't an on-the-shelf guide that we can go, right, so whenever you're doing co-production with any group of people in relation to any kind of service, this is how you do it. And that's the tricky part of it. It depends. It's very bespoke to who you're working with and what you're working on. And therefore, for true co-production, the people then that you're involving are part of shaping how you work together, and that's difficult sometimes when we're under pressure and we're trying to get going and we're working to deadlines, but it will come with time, and just be kind to yourselves over the process, really. Before I start, I just wanted to ask if in the chat anybody would mind, or everybody would mind, just on a 1 to 10, 1 being you're really not confident at all in terms of co-production, to 10, in fact, you're that confident you might as well be talking now. If you didn't mind just popping that in the chat for me, just to get a feel for where everybody's at. I'll give you a minute or two. Don't be shy. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. And I think that shows the difference between understanding the term and the theory and the practice. And if I was probably at a push to guess, the people who are probably less confident are the people that have probably had less experience of having a go in terms of involvement and co-production. And that's the key point to it, really. Are there anyone who's particularly brave, so it isn't me talking out everybody, who's give a lower score in terms of confidence? Is there anything, and you pop it in the chat if you don't feel confident to put a hand up and sort of speak, is there anything that you have identified as something that would improve your confidence around co-production? Or is that an ask too far? Okay.
I think for me,
Tumble.
Natalie,
Yes, go on.
for me, Natalie, it's the scary bit is the blank piece of is what Rachel was saying about the sharing of power, and therefore you, in a sense, put all of your expertise as a professional to one side, and instead of going into a meeting with an individual or a family, or going into a planning session around a review of a service with a plan and with this is what we're going to do, you go in with a blank piece of paper. And I think that's the scary bit, isn't it?
It's an uncomfortable place, and colleagues that I've started to work on who actually have been really proactive in approaching me, getting in touch, I'd like to co-produce over this piece of work, or ticking the boxes in terms of we're right at the beginning of this, all the things in terms of the theory, and we want to get going. And there's a constant need for sort of that steaming of, oh, no, you don't need to run away and sort of pull all this together and then that's okay. You know, it's okay that you don't know, but it's a very uncomfortable space, especially when that flies in the face of certainly feeling that you're a professional in the space as well, and that you should be giving some sort of answers and direction over something, because that's the way it's always been. And I think just looking at some of the comments, thank you for everybody that's type something in. So gaining a better understanding of what it involves and what can be discussed in relation to confidentiality. Confidentiality and safeguarding are such a key part of co-production. There has been, just to put it in context a little bit, there's been some real life learning really on the hoof, if you like, of groups that have been pulled together in quite an informal space. We're encouraging that kind of informality, taking away power imbalances and working in that co-production space, really collaborative space. And actually that's a bit of a that's a bit of a place to just be mindful of things that people are going to discuss, especially when you're looking at health and social care and the areas that we're working in. Some of the experiences that make people experts by experience and make them completely the people to be there, talking about what's gone on for them can be really traumatic for them. It can also be traumatic for other people in the space. It can also create issues around confidentiality, as you mentioned. And I think a top tip really with that just is that collaboratively shaping the group at the beginning. So pulling people together, once you've got your group together in whatever format it comes, because there is all different ways going about this, agreeing with the group around rules for this group and how you're going to treat each other with respect and taking turns sometimes in speaking. It depends on the dynamics of the group. Sometimes you'll have somebody who's really, really super confident, and then other people that have got a lot to say that just won't. So it's about sort of shaping with the group how you're going to give equity in that space, how everybody's going to be safe, what people need to do if they leave the group and they want to speak to somebody about what's been said and what goes on. And I think, like Rachel was saying, it's so important to set the scene at the beginning. The worst thing to do is to try and correct something after the fact. If you can kind of put things in place with the group collaboratively in agreement about how you're going to work together, what's on the table, what's open for discussion, those kind of things, it really helps to save trying to put everything back in the box if it goes a little bit wrong. And if it does, it's about catching that and using it as an opportunity, reflection and improvement and discussion. And I think Phil, Rachel and a lot of colleagues that have joined today, you know, we might be seen as experts in this field, but we're learning every day. Every day is a school day. And I work across the country actually with similar roles in other local authorities, other areas, and every day is a school day. It's not a well-chiseled path, actually. And as I say, the beauty of co-production as well as the challenge of it is it's about people, and everybody's different and things will work differently. And you could do a really good piece of co-production with one group of people, think that worked really well, I'm going to do the same next time, and it would not work. So it's all about using the resource in the room and the people that are there to take responsibility for the process as well as the piece of work or the opportunity. And what I will say around confidence is we're all a little bit learning as we go, maybe not feeling as confident as we might. Take a second to think about the people we're involving with lived experience. Their confidence also will take time to build, and their experience of what co-production will mean, authentic co-production, what it means and what their part in that means takes time, as does relationship building. So I think it's okay to be honest really about that space, and I think that it's really liberating when people with lived experience often have been used to that hierarchical approach, and that they are taking and needing from a system. So to be in a space where it's actually, you know, we're really recognizing that the path that's been walked in their shoes, if you like, thinking of whose shoes, brings such a wealth of experience that we haven't got in that space. But equally, and I think a real key thing around confidence building is recognizing your expertise in the space. So nobody in any room is an expert in everything. You've got a place in that space, and it's about that mutual respect and understanding. So I think just looking at the next comment, if it need leading organisation to think it's needed and have resource time commitment. Yeah, and I think what Tamsin's saying there really is around the need for sort of acknowledgement and drive at a senior level to acknowledge that co-production's needed. I think it's a little bit of chicken and egg. We're in a formative stage at the moment. I often say it's an evolution, not a revolution, co-production, and the more positive examples we've got and the more that we chisel these issues out, because it's an emerging space, so it's not going to be nicely tied up in a bow, perfect, oh look, co-production's working, let's put loads of it. It'll come with time. But I do think, and certainly within the local authority and within health and care, CQC has obviously put co-production front and centre in terms of priorities and asking questions around that. And I think the more that we build confidence, not only amongst ourselves and colleagues, but amongst the people with lived experience that we're involving, they will be in a position, an empowered position, to hold us to account as well. So if people that we're involving are supported to understand what co-production's about and key principles, they're in a better position to go, do you know, I signed up for this and you said it was going to be mutual space with sharing power, and I don't feel like that. And we've got to be open to that and invite that, actually. I think checking in with people we're working with, do you feel that this is meeting the key principles? And I put something a little bit further up in the chat. And I also put something around perspectives. And often when we do consultation and engagement that Rachel was mentioning, nothing wrong with the other rungs of the ladder. In fact, you've got to get up the ladder a rung at a time often. You can't just drop people in sort of right at the top. They've never been involved or informed and expect them to be able to come up with ideas and work in a certain way. It takes time. And actually, one of the problems with not being clear as to whether something is co-production or consultation and engagement is that us and them situation. And that's what I don't know if anyone noticed the perspectives picture I put in with a 6 and a 9. It depends where you're standing. So neither person's necessarily wrong, but co-production for me is sort of going round and trying to see it from the other person's point of view. And working together. And one of the things I think to just point out around co-production, which is something that needs a bit of sort of fine tuning. Yes, people with lived experience might need sort of protected space and sort of positive discrimination almost to be involved and really pump prime to be front and centre. But it isn't just about people working in isolation over here. It's about bringing people in to the fold in the middle of where frontline staff, voluntary sector staff, decision makers are in a space together and finding that way of working. And actually, if you can find easier places, so in terms of confidence building, if there's a nice and neat piece of work around a project or something that's very time specific that you can involve people in, that's a great start to then longer term involvement and skill building over time. I think one of the tricks we're missing as a sector, as a as a collective sector around co-production sometimes is picking people up and injecting them into something for a time limited purpose. And actually, when we're talking about, say, for example, adults that have got health and care experience and they've lived that all their lives, actually ongoing involvement and skill building around co-production and relationship building is where the real opportunity lies to people having that confidence and information. And it takes us all time when you're new in a job and you don't know anybody and you're not sure how people work. You feel a bit uneasy, don't you? So it's exactly the same for the people that we're involving with lived experience. Is there any other questions I've missed? Check out the short video. Yes, please check out the short videos. And Phil, have you popped something? Is that you, Phil? Yes, it is.
Yeah, they're just getting, I'm just thinking that I noticed one person had to leave early and I'm aware that other people, but I just thought if people can give us a feedback score, that would be always useful. But particularly the other thing is anything else that you need, because that's something that we can potentially take forwards over the next few months and make sure that we're providing opportunities to support the workforce. So
and I definitely would say, just to sort of cap off and open the last sort of 10 minutes really for questions, comments, conversation, it's just around confidence. It's okay to admit you don't know. In fact, I think that is a really great place to start with people. especially if there is contention. You know, if people are used to rocking up to a meeting and they feel like people are telling them about their lives and how things are going to be, that puts people's backs up, you know. So to actually go in and go, do you know, this is my first go as much as it's your first go, and you know, sort of equip yourself with the key pillars. And there's some things in the comments. There's great stuff in the toolkit that Skivvies have got. There's links to the page. There's resources everywhere. You don't need to know it all, as long as you know those key principles about making sure that you've taken a breath before you start. What is this decision, piece of work, question? Who, if you only had 10 seats at a table, who do you need in that space? Who do you need to put time and effort into getting there? And then how you work out together how it's going to go. And sometimes, and this has happened, if this makes anybody sort of feel better in the space, I've been approached for people wanting to do co-production, but given the parameters of what is actually possible, co-production isn't possible for this at this time. But that doesn't mean that engagement, involvement, and building towards co-production on the next round or the next piece of work or the next strategy is possible. So as I say, that'd be my biggest tip. Don't look at things in a small, compact space. Think about relationship building, reciprocity, like Rachel said, you know, what are people getting out of this? And a lot of people just want to know that they are not just being listened to, but being truly heard, and it is affecting change. And managing that for people in terms of how long things take is really useful as well, because I think people think if they've said something in a meeting and then it hasn't changed in even 6 months, that it's a failure. And actually it's not. It's going into a bigger picture that might affect something in years to come, but it's kind of that conversation really. I've noticed Rachel's got a hand up, and as I say, just any questions anybody's got, please feel free.
Oh, thanks, Natalie. That's really, really useful. I just want to share, I can't see the chat, so I can't respond to anything. And I've just had a colleague try to join and see if she can see the chat, and it says it's turned off for this meeting. So I do apologise. Please don't think I'm ignoring and not entering anything on the chat.
Well, that's interesting because there's a lot in the chat, so for it not to be working is it's such a shame. But hopefully it'll show up on the videos as well. Yeah, but lots of feedback and lots of positive stuff coming through. So brilliant. Thank you, Natalie. That's a really good whistle stop tour. So we've literally got a few minutes left. So are there any burning questions from anybody? If not, if you can respond to the 2 questions that I put in the chat earlier. So is there anything else that you need in your role or that will be useful to you to support you putting co-production into practice in your area of work? But also if you can just give us a quick score out of 10, with 10 being really useful and informative and 0 being not very useful and informative, which hopefully there won't be too many of those. That would be brilliant. I'm just checking to see if there's any questions coming through.
What we'll say, Phil, how amazing is this? Everybody's took an hour out of their busy time to come and talk about co-production. The more we talk, the more we learn, and the more colleagues try and sometimes fail or don't quite, you know, shoot for the moon if you miss, you're amongst the stars. You know, we're getting people involved and we're learning from the people we're involving, and in years to come there'll be different challenges that we've never even thought of at this point in time, because it's getting more meaningful and more, you know, in the depth of things. So I just think it's a really positive thing. Obviously, co-production week was last week nationally. There's a lot of resources, tools and things in Staffordshire. We're doing it for an extended period. So please just go. There's loads. I would really encourage people on the videos that Phil's talking about. There's little videos from key people across Staffordshire just talking about co-production. There's some examples on there, top tips, and as a collective team we're hoping to get more of those, including videos of people with lived experience that becoming experts in co-production now as well. So not just by their experience, but by being involved. So that will create a wealth of information and understanding as well. So I just am really chuffed to see so many people turning up. And if we want more of these as well, you know, please let us know, and we'll, you know, and hopefully have a bit more of a chat. If there's things people particularly want to speak about, we can pull another one together. The more we're confident to admit that we're not confident, the better, I think, sometimes.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself, Natalie. That's a really good conclusion. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining us today. It looks from the scores that people have said is that it's been really valuable. So yeah, keep us in touch. Hopefully you've got our contact details as well through the meeting invite. So yeah, we would happily continue this conversation over the coming months and years. And if we don't do anything else, we'll reconvene in Co-Production Week 2026 and continue to see how we're all getting on with putting this into practice. So yeah, thanks very much everybody for attending. It's been brilliant to see you all. All right.